In this corner, the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Hush Batman. And in this corner, the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Hush Hush. Wait a minute, this isn't a Versus, it's a Versus 2-pack. A bad one. Stick around. You don't want to miss this. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, poseability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Starting off with the packaging, and since it's a 2-pack, the box is extra wide, UPC for those who want it, and disappointment on the back. Incriminating disappointment, as we'll see in the next category. What baffles me is that, similar to Red Robin, they released a pretty cool promotional image when they announced this. Why on earth would they use this boring digital render if this really cool image was already made? Also, I know I don't normally talk about this, but I'd like to take a moment to comment on the insert. Single-carded DC Multiverse figures all have the same blue and white insert tray. For their 2-packs, they add a bit of extra razzle-dazzle, and it's very much appreciated. This skyline background taken from the comics is really cool. So cool that I would love to be able to use it as a backdrop to display my figures. Unfortunately, I can't. The blister for the accessories is glued to it. I know that this is cheaper and easier, but I would love it if McFarlane could figure out a separate blister system for these accessories so we could have the added value of really cool insert trays like this. Will I dock the box points for that? No. I'll dock it points for this though. For packaging, I'm giving Batman vs. Hush half a point. Moving on to presentation, and Hush stands at 7 inches, and to the tip of his ears, Batman stands at a towering 7.5. The first thing you might notice is that Batman is a lot taller than Hush. At least it would be the first thing you'd notice if McFarlane Toys hadn't done this. And it might even be the second thing you'd notice if it wasn't for Batman's head sculpt. If I just showed you this, you would probably think that not only were you looking at a great Batman figure, but possibly one of the best Batman figures ever made. Seriously, what happened? It's worth noting that this is mostly the exact same sculpt as the Three Jokers version. The upper arm is the same, the lower torso is the same, the underpants are the same, and the thigh and the top of the calf is the same. Not only that, but the shoe is reused from the Year 2 version. And don't you worry, we're going to be talking about these shoes. The Year 2 Batman had a similar dilemma where instead of sculpting the glove, they just painted it on. It doesn't look great, but it's a lot better than this. And what baffles me is the Three Jokers had no problem sculpting and painting a glove. The grays don't match, unfortunately, so you can't just swap the arms out. It's the kind of corner cutting I would expect from a company like Lannard. They did this so they could sell their Predator for $10. But in Lannard's defense, they make toys for little kids. A company like McFarlane Toys has no excuse. In my last video, I got on to Hasbro for doing something similar with Iron Man, but at least with him, there's enough red and gold going on up there where it kind of works. And it's not like this was some kind of production error. It was very clear from the solicitation image. But it's also very clear from this image that it didn't have to be that way. Returning to the head sculpt, and again, I find myself asking why. If you weren't going to do a static expression, I could have at least understood gritting his teeth. As is, we're stuck with an action figure of the world's greatest detective looking forever dumbfounded. It's a real shame because otherwise this is a nice figure. Except for the expression, I like this head. I like the pouch belt. I love the cape, and I really appreciate that we finally got the pointed boot tops that we should have gotten with Batman Year 2. Moving over to Hush, and I'd be a liar if I said I wasn't pretty disappointed in this one too. While Hush did wear the coat buttoned up briefly, this was not his standard look. Going into it, I assumed that he was going to be like the comedian Joker. You know, regular Three Jokers body and a long coat over it. I was figuring I could maybe swap this coat out for Dark Detective, and that way I could have the version that most of us were looking for. Nope. I honestly feel like they should have gone one step further and had a sign underneath that said, "Gotcha!" That said, just because a figure, or figures in this case, doesn't live up to my expectations doesn't mean that they're bad on their own merit. There's actually a wash to the bandages to bring out the detail, which is really appreciated. And they did do a good job sculpting the coat. They also added flaps to help with articulation. As always, the texture's great, and then looking under the coat, that's been pretty well detailed too. They even added all this nice detail under the boots. And that brings us back to Batman. Remember when I said that they reused the feet from Batman Year 2? The soles of those feet are as smooth as a baby's bottom. That wouldn't be such a problem if not for one thing. Batman's heavily really detailed treads are the first thing that we see kicking us in the face in the Hush comic. And not just the cover either. We see Batman's feet so much in this comic that you'd think Quentin Tarantino drew it. Hopefully, McFarlane Toys releases a single-carded version of this figure with proper gloves, the correct shoes, and a more static expression. Then they could reissue it again in blue, maybe in a 2-pack with Superman. And hopefully they'll also release a version of Hush that properly showcases his very cool costume in all its glory. Until then, these figures are nothing but a half measure, and for presentation, they deserve nothing more than half a point. Moving on to Poseability, and there's some significant differences between the two. Like most DC Multiverse figures, Hush's head's on a dumbbell joint. Batman's head, however, is on the same system as the 3 Jokers. It's kinda hard to see because of the coat, but Hush can look up this far and down this far. He also gets a great amount of tilt and all the way around. Because all of Batman's articulation is at the base of the neck, his range is a little bit different. Unfortunately, because the way Batman's head hits up against the cape, he can't look up at all. He can, however, bury the chin. He gets tilt, but it's very unnatural, but he can look all the way around. Both figures have swivel hinge shoulders that raise up this far. Batman has a rotator cuff, and Hush does not. Both of them do, however, have bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and McFarlane wrist balls that swivel and hinge. Shifting to the torso, and Batman has a typical diaphragm joint and dumbbell waist. Mine, unfortunately, is a little bit loose, and the weight of the cape keeps forcing him backwards. That said, he can arch back this far, and hunch over not far at all. He does, however, get a bit of tilt and twist. Of course, we've already seen what Hush has under the coat, so we do have a bit of an idea of what to expect. He can twist, of course. Well, that's a look. He can actually hunch over more than Batman, and arch back a pretty fair amount too. He can even tilt and kind of hold the pose. Below the waist, and both of them have typical McFarlane hips. Batman can kick out this far and split this far. Hush, on the other hand, has his giant trench coat, which you would expect would turn him into a traffic cone, but he can kick out this far, which again is more than Batman, and split this far. He even gets a really good amount of twist, as does Batman. Both of them have double jointed knees, and thanks to the slit in the back of the throat, and thanks to the slit in the back of the coat, Hush's works just fine. And then moving all the way down, they both have toe articulation and McFarlane ankle balls that swivel, hinge, and pivot. If you told me that between these two figures, Hush would have better range than Batman, I'd have said you were crazy. That said, neither of these figures have bad articulation. In fact, for Poseability, I'm giving Batman vs. Hush 1 whole point. Moving on to Playability, and both figures come with trading cards. If you want to read more about Hush, pause here. And if you just arrived on Earth and want to find out who Batman is, pause here. Also, welcome to Earth. Additionally, Batman comes with a couple of batarangs. He can hold them like so. Hush, on the other hand, comes with a shovel so he can reenact the ending of Psycho 2. Oddly enough, there's a bunch of dirt sculpted on the shovel, but they didn't bother to paint it. Even more on the other side, if they weren't going to bother to paint the dirt in, they should have just left it clean. As is, it just kind of looks like it's covered in solder spills. That said, a shovel is a pretty cool accessory, and I am glad that they included it. They also included a couple of figure stands, which is kind of curious because they also have a display base. This one is a cemetery scene, and to go with that cemetery is Jason Todd's headstone. It clicks in like so. Like so. Nothing to it. This, of course, is the second cemetery display base we've gotten. I will say that when I look at the Year 2 cemetery and bask in all the sculpted and painted detail, this one feels a bit cheaper by comparison. As always, you can always go in and repaint it yourself. That being said, you really shouldn't have to. Anyway, if you want to display them on the base, here's what it looks like. But Playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figures play with others. Starting with the Bat family, and here we have a Damian Wayne Robin by Mattel, and here we have McFarlane. For some Tim Drakes, here we have Mattel, here we have Gotham Knights by McFarlane, here we have Red Robin, and here they are with Grave Robin. Thank you, I'll be here all week. And on that note, here's Jason Todd, all grown up as the Red Hood. Speaking of grown-up Robins, here we have Dick Grayson as Nightwing. This is from DC Essentials. Here we have Art of the Crime Batgirl from DC Multiverse. Here we have her father, Commissioner Gordon. This is from DC Collectibles. And here we have Alfred by Mattel. For just a few other DC Multiverse Batman figures, here we have Detective Comics 1000. Here we have Flashpoint, Dark Knight's Death Metal, DC Rebirth, Future State, and Dark Detective. He's standing closer to Hush because they both have trench coats. also because his is bumping into Batman. Lastly, here we have the Batman Who Laughs. This segues perfectly to the Joker and other villains. Here we have DC Rebirth, here's Mortal Kombat 11, the Three Jokers comedian, I included him because of the coat, and my own Kit Bash using Death of the Family and the Clown. For some other villains who appeared in Hush, here we have Harley Quinn, this one's from DC Essentials. Here we have Catwoman, this one's from the DC Collectibles Greg Capullo Designer Series. Here we have a floppy leg Poison Ivy from DC Direct. Here we have a Hush version of Scarecrow, also from DC Direct. Here we have a DC Direct Killer Croc. Here we have the Clayface Megafig, and the mastermind of the whole thing, the Riddler. This one's also from the Greg Capullo series. For just a few quick Justice League comparisons, here we have Superman. Here we have Wonder Woman. I chose the 1984 version because it's the closest thing that we have to a regular one. Here we have the Flash, Endless Winter Aquaman, and Hal Jordan Green Lantern. For a Hush-specific comparison, here he is with the original figure from DC Direct. Obviously this one would be more at home in a 6-inch collection, but it's still a nice example of what could have been. For a relative scale comparison, here they are with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here they are with Stealth Iron Man. But Jason, I hear you say, didn't you forget a few Batmans? Only the ones I can do some head swaps with. First things first, and here's a Target exclusive battle damage version. If you like this body and wanted a more stylized head, it's definitely an option. Unfortunately, the way the back of the neck is sculpted, it keeps the face pointing downward, and of course you are still left with that slack-jawed look. On the flip side, I can't really say that this works. The neck is definitely longer, but it's also a lot thicker. Even so, if you like what you see, more power to you. Here we have Batman Year 2. At a glance, and this looks pretty cool. It goes without saying that you need to do a repaint, but since it's mostly the same body, it fits really well. That said, I like this even better. To be honest, if I had an extra head, I would probably paint it black right now. Thirdly, here we have Three Jokers. Boy, oh boy, do I like this. If his mouth was closed, this would be my favorite Batman head sculpt. And honestly, this is probably how I would display it. This, of course, looks pretty good too. All things considered, obviously the textures don't match, but overall this is a pretty solid Batman. The accessories for this set are fine, and despite how I feel about the design choice, this Hush scales pretty well with other figures. Batman, on the other hand, is really tall, even taller than Superman. Combining his height with the elbow issue and facial expression, and your display options are unfortunately a bit more limited. It's not impossible, just needlessly frustrating. For playability, I'm giving the Hush 2-pack half a point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. I found this 2-pack at GameStop for $39.99. If you're mainly just interested in this for the Hush figure, there's a single carded version available, and honestly, you should probably just buy that. As consumers, if we support this figure, it tells McFarlane Toys that it's okay for them to do it again. I know that I'm being uncharacteristically harsh, but in my experience, the things that we hate the most are often very closely associated with the things that we love the most, and I love both McFarlane Toys and DC Multiverse very much. And knowing the level of quality that McFarlane Toys is capable of, it would be wrong of me to Hush. For price, I'm giving the Batman vs. Hush 2-pack half a point for a grand total of 3 out of 5. For much better DC Multiverse Batman figures, check out this one on the Batman Who Laughs, or this one on the Batman of Zor-Anar. Do you think I've hit the nail on the head, or have I been too harsh? Sound off in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.